My name is Daniel Hayes. I'm 56 years old, and for most of my adult life, I made a living walking straight into places other people were desperate to escape. I filmed in cities split open by shelling, villages hollowed out by famine, refugee camps where children learned to sleep through helicopter rotors and distant gunfire. I spent decades documenting collapse, and somewhere along the way I developed a private arrogance about my own life. I thought that because I had seen the worst of the world up close, I would recognize danger before it ever reached my front door. Seattle was supposed to be the reward for surviving all of that. Our house sat on a quiet street lined with wet maple trees and dark stone walls, the kind of neighborhood where nothing dramatic ever seemed to happen. In the mornings, the air smelled like rain and cedar. Claire would already be in the kitchen by the time I came downstairs, standing barefoot on the hardwood floor, one hand around a coffee mug, the other flipping through student papers with a pencil tucked behind her ear. She had a calm about her that used to make me feel anchored. Even after 28 years of marriage, I could still look at her across a room and feel that small, steady relief of knowing my life had landed somewhere solid. That was the story I told myself, anyway. Claire taught at the university, supervised research grants, sat on committees, remembered birthdays, sent thank-you notes, kept our life running with a kind of quiet precision I admired, because I'd never had it. I was the one always leaving. Rwanda, Aleppo, Kharkiv, Southern Sudan, Reykjavik next for a climate piece I'd agreed to shoot after telling everyone I was slowing down. Claire never complained in a way that sounded bitter. She would just smile a little, smooth the front of my jacket, and ask how long I'd be gone this time. We had a son, Evan, 19, away at college in Oregon. He called when he needed something and texted when he remembered, which seemed normal enough for that age. I told myself the distance meant he was growing up, not drifting away. When Claire and I talked about the future, we talked like people who had earned a softer final act. Fewer flights, longer dinners, weekends on the water. Maybe selling the house in a few years and finding someplace smaller once Evan was fully launched. From the outside, it looked untouchable. A seasoned marriage, a successful career, a son with his life ahead of him, enough money to breathe, enough history to feel permanent. I believed in that picture so completely that I stopped checking whether it was still true. That was my mistake. Because the most dangerous lies are the ones that fit so neatly into the life you want that you never think to question them. I was leaving for Iceland on a Thursday afternoon. The rain had started before dawn and never really stopped, just shifted and weighed against the kitchen windows while I moved through the usual routine. 2 camera bodies on the dining table, batteries charging by the wall, thermal gear folded over a chair, passport in the outer pocket of my bag. It was all familiar enough that I barely had to think. Claire was upstairs finishing a call. I could hear her voice through the floorboards, low and even, the polished academic tone she used when she wanted to sound both warm and impossible to interrupt. I remember glancing at the clock on the oven. 11:17. I remember the smell of burnt toast because I'd forgotten it in the toaster while checking an email from my producer. I remember those details because everything after them split cleanly in two. Before I saw the message and after. Her tablet was on the kitchen island, screen down, beside a half-open leather folder and a yellow legal pad filled with neat blue handwriting. Claire was careful with her devices. Too careful, usually. She didn't leave them lying around unlocked. That day, maybe because she was distracted, maybe because she thought she was safe, the screen lit up. Just a small flash of white against the gray kitchen. I looked without meaning to. Then I looked again because I thought I had read it wrong. Same cabin. Friday. He'll be gone again. The message sat there in plain black text, clean and ordinary, as if it belonged among grocery reminders and committee updates. Under it was the sender's name, Mark Dalton. For a second, my mind refused to attach meaning to it. Mark Dalton, the real estate developer with the expensive watch and easy laugh. Mark Dalton, who had stood on my deck last summer with a glass of bourbon in his hand, talking to me about housing permits and timber prices while Claire brought out grilled salmon on a cedar plank. Mark Dalton, who had sat at my table, refilled his wine in my kitchen, clapped my shoulder like we were the kind of men who trusted each other. I didn't pick up the tablet right away. I just stood there with one hand on the zipper of my equipment bag, staring at those 6 words. Same cabin. Friday. He'll be gone again. Not maybe. Not can you. Not anything uncertain. It read like routine. A habit. A schedule built so smoothly into their lives that it only needed shorthand. Upstairs, I heard Claire laugh softly at something on the phone. That sounded it. I picked up the tablet. My fingers were steady, which disturbed me more than if they'd shaken. The screen was still unlocked. Their message thread was open the moment I touched it, as if the house itself had finally decided I was the last person entitled to know what was happening inside it. And when I saw the length of that thread, I understood one thing immediately. This had not just begun. I didn't scroll at first. I just stared at the last message, letting the words settle into something real. Then I moved my thumb. The thread kept going. And going. It wasn't a handful of reckless messages. It wasn't a mistake. It was structure. Weeks stacked into months, each message fitting into the next like they had been building something deliberate behind my back. Next time earlier. Missed you last weekend. Booked under your conference name. Same as before. Don't worry, he's in Kiev that week. I paused there. Kiev. I remembered that trip. I remembered the cold that got into my bones, the hotel with the flickering hallway lights, the way I'd called Claire from the balcony because the connection inside was bad. She had sounded tired but affectionate. Asked if I was eating properly. Told me she missed me. Below that message, Mark had replied, "Perfect. I like when he's far." I felt something shift in my chest, not sharp, not explosive, just a quiet, heavy realignment, like something locking into place. I kept reading. Cabins. Always cabins. Remote ones. Lakefront. Mountain edges. Places no one would recognize them. They planned around my travel schedule with precision that bordered on professional. Dates, times, alibis. Her faculty retreats. His site visits. My flights weren't interruptions to them. They were opportunities. And then the tone changed. That was the part one hadn't expected. It wasn't just logistics. It was commentary. Does he ever notice anything? He's too wrapped up in saving the world. That documentary life is perfect for us. I stopped again. Read that last line twice. Perfect for us. There was a photo further up. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. A cabin window at dusk, warm light spilling onto snow. 2 wine glasses on a wooden table. Her hand in the frame, the ring I gave her still on her finger. I remembered that week. I had been in Sudan, filming a drought story. I'd slept in a tent that smelled like dust and diesel. I'd sent her a message that night. Wish you were here. It's quiet in a strange way. She had replied hours later. Busy day. Talk tomorrow. Love you. I scrolled back to that exact date in the thread. There it was. Snow's perfect tonight. Bring that bottle you like. Already packed. Timestamps didn't lie. They never had. For a moment, I tried to reconstruct the version of my life where this didn't exist. The dinners, the conversations, the small touches as I passed her in the hallway. But the messages kept filling in the gaps I hadn't noticed before. Every absence explained. Every delay accounted for. This wasn't chaos. It was routine. Carefully built, quietly maintained, and completely dependent on one thing. Me not looking. Upstairs, Claire's footsteps crossed the floor. Slow. Measured. Familiar. I locked the tablet and placed it exactly where I'd found it. By the time she came down, I was zipping my bag like nothing in my life had changed. But something had. And I knew, with absolute clarity, that whatever this was, I wasn't going to react to it. I was going to understand it first. Claire came downstairs still holding her phone, her expression neutral, controlled. She glanced at my bags, then at me. "What time's your flight?" she asked. 3, I said, without hesitation. She nodded, like that answer fit neatly into whatever version of reality she was maintaining. "You'll make it. Traffic's light today." I watched her walk past me to the coffee machine. Same. If there was anything different in her, it was invisible. Or maybe it had always been there, and I just never looked closely enough. I'll call when I land, I added. Of course you will, she said, not turning around. That line stayed with me longer than it should have. I left the house at 12:05. I remember the time because I checked it deliberately as I closed the front door. The rain had thinned to a mist, the kind that hangs in the air without falling. My car was parked exactly where I always left it. Nothing about the world looked different. That was the strange part. I drove toward the airport like I'd done 100 times before. Same route, same turns, same quiet radio in the background. But every now felt rehearsed, like I was playing a role I no longer believed in. At 12:42, I exited the highway, not toward the airport. I didn't slow down when I did it. No hesitation, no second thought. Just a clean, quiet decision. The kind I used to make in conflict zones when hesitation got people hurt. I drove for another 20 minutes before pulling into an empty parking lot behind a closed hardware store. The sign above the building flickered faintly, even in daylight. I turned off the engine and just sat there. For the first time since reading the messages, I allowed myself to think without interruption. Not react, not feel. Think. If I confronted her now, what would I get? Denial. Partial truths. Controlled damage. She had months, maybe longer, of practice managing this. I had less than an hour of information. That wasn't a fair fight. And I don't walk into situations I don't understand. I took out my phone and opened my email. The Iceland itinerary was still there. Flights confirmed. Crew waiting. Everything set in motion. I canceled it. Not dramatically. Not impulsively. Just a few quiet taps. A message to the producer. Delaying departure. Will update shortly. No explanation. No. Then I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes for a moment. This wasn't about catching them anymore. It was about understanding the full shape of what they'd built. The cabins. The planning. The timing around my travel. That level of precision didn't exist in isolation. It connected to something larger. It had to. People don't construct systems like that unless they're protecting more than just an affair. I opened my eyes and reached for my phone again. There was one name from that thread that mattered just as much as Claire's. Mark Dalton. And if there was one thing I'd learned after decades of documenting other people's secrets, it was this. No one hides just one thing. I started driving again, this time without a destination, just a direction. And for the first time since that message lit up the kitchen, I felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Control. I didn't call Claire. I didn't call Mark. I went home. Not inside the house. I wasn't ready for that yet. I parked 2 streets down, under a row of bare trees, and watched the front of my own life like it belonged to someone else. The windows were still. The porch light was off. Everything looked exactly the way it had that morning. Stable. Quiet. False. I sat there for almost an hour, going over the messages again in my head, not the words themselves, but the patterns. The precision. The way Mark spoke, too comfortable, too practiced. This wasn't his first time hiding something, which meant there was someone else. I pulled out my phone and searched his name. Mark Dalton. It didn't take long to find what I needed. Public records. Articles. Photos from charity events. In most of them, he wasn't alone. Lena Dalton. His wife. There were pictures of them together at fundraisers, standing shoulder to shoulder, both smiling in that polished, rehearsed way people do when they understand exactly how they're being seen. She looked composed. Sharp. The kind of person who noticed details other people missed. I saved her number. For a moment, I considered what I was about to do. This could collapse everything faster than I intended. It could turn something controlled into something chaotic. But there was a chance, just a small one, that she already knew something. People like Mark didn't operate in clean, isolated lies. I pressed call. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Lena Dalton, she said. Her voice was clear, direct. No hesitation. My name is Daniel Hayes, I said. I believe we need to talk. There was a pause. Not confusion. Not surprise. Recognition. I was wondering when you'd call, she said quietly. That was the first shift. I straightened slightly in the driver's seat. You know why I'm calling? Yes, she replied. I do. No denial. No questions. Just confirmation. How long? I asked. Long enough, she said. Longer than you'd like. I watched my house as she spoke, my eyes fixed on the front door. You've known, I said. I've suspected, she corrected. And I don't act on suspicion. There was something in her tone I recognized immediately. The same thing I'd heard in investigators, in war correspondents, in people who had spent time studying damage before deciding where to apply pressure. What have you done? I asked. Another pause. Slightly longer this time. Collected, she said. Records. Financials. Movement patterns. Enough to stop guessing. That word settled heavily. Financials. This wasn't just about the meeting in cabins. I think we should meet, she added. Why? I asked. Because, she said, her voice lowering just enough to matter. If you've only seen the messages, then you're still looking at the smallest part of what's actually happening. I didn't respond right away. The rain started again, tapping softly against the windshield. Where? I finally asked. I'll text you an address, she said. 1 hour. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, my gaze still fixed on the house that no longer felt like mine. This was supposed to be about betrayal. It wasn't. Not entirely. Because, whatever Claire and Mark had built, it was bigger than an affair. And Lena Dalton had been waiting for me to notice. The address Lena sent was across the lake, in a part of the city that didn't advertise itself. Quiet streets. Private entrances. Buildings with tinted glass and no signage. I arrived 10 minutes early. She was already there. Corner table. Back to the wall. A clear line of sight to the entrance. She didn't wave when I walked in, just watched me approach like she'd already measured everything she needed to know. Up close, she looked exactly like the photos, composed, precise, but there was something colder in person. Less performance. More intent. Daniel, she said. Lena. I sat across from her. The table between us was empty except for a single folder and a glass of water she hadn't touched. No small talk. I asked. There isn't any, she replied. That was fine with me. You said this is bigger than an affair, I said. She slid the folder across the table. Look. Inside were documents. Not copies pulled in a rush, organized, labeled, clean. Property records. Shell companies. Transfer logs. I flipped through the first few pages, scanning. Fake acquisitions. Inflated valuations. Money moving through entities that technically existed but didn't do anything real. Mark's name appeared often. Claire's appeared less, but enough. Academic grants. Research funding. Allocations that didn't quite line up with the projects they were supposed to support. I felt something settle deeper. This isn't sloppy, I said. No, Lena replied. It's deliberate. I turned another page. Dates. They matched the messages. Trips. Conferences. The same weekends. The same locations. They weren't just meeting, I said slowly. They were coordinating, she corrected. I looked up at her. You've known all of this? I've been building it, she said. There was no hesitation in her voice. No emotion. Just fact. For how long? I asked. 8 months, she said. Longer if you count the patterns before I started documenting them. 8 months. While I was flying in and out of war zones, thinking my life was stable, she had been sitting across from this, constructing something piece by piece. And you waited, I said. I prepared, she corrected again. I closed the folder. Why tell me now? For the first time, she leaned back slightly, studying me instead of the situation. Because you just became useful, she said. Not cruel. Not mocking. Accurate. I held her gaze. Useful how? She folded her hands on the table, finally taking a sip of water before answering. An affair destroys reputations, she said. It creates noise. Drama. Distraction. I didn't interrupt. A financial case, she continued, destroys everything. The room felt quieter after that. They've been laundering money through property deals tied to Claire's grants, she said. On paper, it's complex. In reality, it's simple. They move funds where no one is looking. And the cabins? I asked. Control points, she said. Places where they finalize decisions. Exchange documents. Stay off predictable grids. I thought about the messages again. The precision. The routine. It all fit. You want to expose them, I said. Lena's expression didn't change. No, she said. I waited. I want to end them, she continued calmly. Completely. There it was. Not revenge. Erasure. And you need me for that, I said. Yes. Why? Because, she said, her eyes locking onto mine in a way that made the answer land heavier than it should have. They built all of this around you. I didn't speak. You are the variable that makes their system work, she said. Your travel. Your absence. Your reputation. A quiet pause. If you move correctly, she added, their entire structure collapses. I leaned back slightly, letting that settle. This wasn't a confrontation anymore. It was strategy. And what happens when it does? I asked. Lena didn't look away. They lose everything, she said. No emphasis. No emotion. Just certainty. For a moment, I thought about Claire in the kitchen that morning. Barefoot. Coffee in her hand. Calm. Then I thought about the message. Same cabin. Friday. He'll be gone again. I looked back at Lena. What do you need me to do? That was the moment something irreversible began. I didn't go home that night. Not because I was afraid of what I'd say, but because I wasn't ready to say anything yet. Lena's words stayed with me longer than I expected. They built all of this around you. If that was true, then everything I thought was neutral in my life wasn't neutral at all. It was leverage. I checked into a small hotel near the water. Nothing expensive. Clean, quiet, forgettable. The kind of place no one asks questions. I set my bag down, didn't unpack, and sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand. There was one person I needed to hear from. Evan. I called him. It rang longer than usual. Hey, he said, finally distracted. Background noise, voices, maybe a dorm hallway. Got a minute? I asked. A pause. Yeah. What's up? I kept my voice steady. Just checking in. Haven't talked in a bit. Yeah. I've been busy, he said. Midterms. That makes sense. Another pause. Slightly longer this time. You okay? He asked. It was a simple question. Normal. But something about the way he said it felt rehearsed. Like he was supposed to ask it. I'm fine, I said. Why? No reason, he replied quickly. Mom just mentioned you've been pushing yourself a lot lately. There it was. Small. Casual. Planted. I didn't react. She worries, I said. Yeah, he said. She said you've been, I don't know, not sleeping much, getting kind of intense about work. I stared at the blank wall across the room. Did she say anything else? I asked. Evan hesitated. I could hear him shifting the phone. Not really, he said. Just that maybe you should slow down. Take a break or something. I let that sit in silence for a second. Do you think that? I asked. Another pause. I mean, you are gone a lot, he said carefully. Sometimes it feels like, I don't know, like work comes first. Not anger. Not accusation. Distance. Manufactured, but effective. I understand, I said. And I did. Not because it was true, but because it had been built to sound true. We talked a few more minutes. Classes. Nothing important. When the call ended, I didn't move right away. I just sat there, phone still in my hand, replaying every word. Claire hadn't just been hiding something. She had been shaping the narrative around me. Unstable. Obsessive. Absent. It was subtle. Smart. The kind of groundwork that didn't raise alarms because each piece, on its own, sounded reasonable. Concern. Worry. A wife explaining her husband to the world in a way that made her look patient, and him unreliable. I opened my email and searched my own name. Nothing obvious. Then I checked older messages. Conversations with colleagues. Missed calls. Small things I'd ignored at the time. Claire mentioned you've been under pressure. Everything okay on your end? I heard you might be stepping back soon. Not direct, but consistent. I leaned back slowly. This wasn't preparation for an affair. This was preparation for an exit. controlled, documented, supported by perception. And if I had confronted her when I first saw those messages, I would have walked straight into it. I stood up and walked to the window. The water outside was black, reflecting scattered city lights that broke apart every time the wind touched the surface. Lena was right. I hadn't been looking at the full picture, but now I was. And the more I saw, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about surviving what came after. We didn't choose a courtroom. We didn't choose a public event. We chose their pattern. The cabin. Lena found it within hours. Same booking style, same alias, same remote location 2 hours outside the city. A luxury lakeside property, isolated, expensive, designed for privacy. Floor-to-ceiling glass, facing the water. No nearby neighbors. No. Perfect for them. Perfect for us. Friday night. I drove separately. Lena insisted on that. No unnecessary connections, she had said. Everything about her plan was controlled down to the smallest detail. When I arrived, the sky was already dark, the lake completely still, like a sheet of black glass. The cabin lights were on. They were inside. I didn't rush. I stepped out of the car, closed the door quietly, and walked toward the entrance like I belonged there. Because, in a way, I did. Through the glass, I could see them. Claire was standing near the kitchen island, a glass of wine in her hand. She was wearing a dark sweater I recognized. One she usually wore at home. Comfortable. Familiar. Mark stood across from her, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, laughing at something she said. Relaxed. Unaware. For a moment I just watched. Not out of hesitation, but precision. I wanted to see them exactly as they were when they thought no one was looking. Then I opened the door. The sound cut cleanly through the room. They both turned. Claire's face didn't change immediately. There was a split second where her expression stayed exactly the same, mid-conversation, mid-breath, before reality caught up. Mark reacted first. A step back. Shoulders tightening. Daniel, Claire started. I raised a hand slightly. Don't, I said. My voice was calm, even. That unsettled them more than anything else. I stepped inside fully, closing the door behind me. No scene, I added. This isn't that. Mark glanced toward Claire, then back at me, trying to calculate something he no longer had time to understand. What is this? He asked. I looked at him for a moment. You'll see. And right then, headlights flooded the windows. Bright. Sudden. Multiple vehicles. Mark turned toward the glass. Claire froze. Doors slammed outside. Heavy. Coordinated. Then, a sharp knock. Not polite. Official. Claire's hand tightened around the glass. Daniel, what did you? I didn't answer. The door opened before anyone could move. 2 federal agents stepped inside, followed by more behind them. Dark jackets. Clear identification. No hesitation. Mark Dalton, one of them said. Silence. Then, we have a warrant. Everything shifted at once. Mark's composure broke first. There's some mistake. There isn't, the agent replied. Claire looked at me then. Not confused. Not shocked. Something else. Realization. You knew, she said quietly. I met her eyes. Yes. Behind me, Lena stepped into the doorway. She hadn't rushed. She never did. The agents were already moving, papers out, voices controlled, the space filling with authority that didn't ask permission. Mark was talking faster now. Too fast. Words collapsing over each other. Claire didn't speak again. She just watched Lena. And that's when I understood something I hadn't before. This moment, this exact collapse, had been planned long before I ever made that phone call. I wasn't the one who started this. I was just the one who walked into it. They separated them immediately. Mark was pulled toward the far side of the room, 2 agents guiding him with firm, controlled movements. His voice had lost structure completely now, fragments of denial, without weight. This is a misunderstanding. There's nothing illegal here. I want my lawyer. No one reacted. Claire didn't move. She stood exactly where I had first seen her, glass still in her hand, untouched now. Her eyes weren't on me anymore. They were on Lena, trying to understand, failing. An agent approached Claire next.
Calm.
Professional. Claire Hayes, he said, confirming. She didn't answer immediately. Then, quietly, yes. We'll need you to come with us. That was the moment something inside her shifted. Not panic, not fear, but calculation. The same controlled thinking I had seen for years, now turning inward, searching for an angle that no longer existed. This is about Mark, she said carefully. I'm not involved in. Lena stepped forward slightly.
Don't, she said.
Just one word. Claire looked at her fully now.
You did this, she said.
Not a question. Lena didn't deny it. You built it with him, Lena replied. I just documented it. The room went quiet in a different way after that. Not chaos. Finality. Claire's fingers tightened slightly around the glass before she set it down with deliberate care, as if maintaining control over that one small action still mattered. You think this ends him? She asked. Lena's expression didn't change.
No, she said.
I think this explains him. That landed harder than anything else.
Mark stopped talking.
For the first time since the agents arrived, he went completely silent. Because he understood. This wasn't just exposure. It was evidence. Financial records. Transactions.
Patterns.
All of it already mapped. Already handed over. The affair wasn't the center of this. It was just the thread that connected everything else. They weren't being accused. They were being processed. An agent guided Claire toward the door.
She didn't resist.
Didn't argue. But as she passed me, she slowed just enough to speak. You could have talked to me, she said quietly. I looked at her. At the woman I had built a life with. The woman who had already rewritten me in conversations I wasn't part of. I did, I said. You just didn't know it. She held my gaze for a second longer, then looked away. That was the last moment of anything resembling control she had. Outside, the cold air cut through the tension. More vehicles. More people. Everything structured, contained, inevitable. Mark was placed into one car. Claire into another.
Doors closed.
Engine started. And just like that, they were gone. The silence that followed felt heavier than the confrontation itself. I stood there, looking out over the lake, the surface still undisturbed, like none of it had ever happened. Behind me, Lena stepped closer. You handled that well, she said. I didn't turn around. This was already in motion before I called you. I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a conclusion. A small pause. Yes, she said. I let that settle. All of it? I asked. Most of it, she replied. You accelerated the timeline. I finally looked at her. So, I was never really your partner in this, I said. She met my, without hesitation. You were necessary, she said. Honest. Cold. Accurate. I studied her for a moment, then nodded once. Because I understood something now that I hadn't before. This wasn't my plan. It never was. I was just the final piece she needed to make it complete. And the moment I stepped into it, there was no version of this where it ended any differently. The house felt different the first time I walked back into it alone. Not empty. Revealed. The same furniture. The same quiet hallway. Claire's coat still hanging by the door, her shoes placed neatly beneath the bench. Nothing had been disturbed, but everything had shifted. It was like walking through a set after filming ends. Intact, but no longer real. I didn't turn on the lights right away. I stood in the entryway, listening. There was no movement upstairs. No voice in the kitchen. No quiet presence filling the spaces between rooms. Just silence. I walked through slowly, not searching for anything specific. Just observing. The details I had ignored for years now felt different. The second phone charger in her office. The extra set of keys in the drawer. Small things. Invisible before. Obvious now. I didn't touch them. There was nothing left to prove. Evan came home 2 weeks later. He stood in the doorway longer than he needed to, his bag still over his shoulder, like he wasn't sure which version of this house he was walking into. I know, he said before I could speak. I nodded once. We didn't go through everything at once. That wasn't how this worked. Truth, I had learned, lands better in controlled pieces. Not all at once. So we talked. Not about betrayal first, but about facts. What happened? What didn't?
What had been said about me?
What wasn't true? He listened. Really listened. And slowly, I watched something repair itself. Not completely. Not instantly. But enough. Claire called once. I didn't answer. She left a message.
Come.
Controlled. Still trying to shape the narrative, even now. I deleted it without listening to the end. There was nothing left to hear. Mark's case moved quickly. Faster than I expected. Financial crimes don't leave much room for interpretation when the records are clean. His name disappeared from boards, from projects, from the circles he had carefully built himself into. Claire's collapse was quieter. No headlines. Just absence. Positions withdrawn. Invitations gone. Grants reviewed. Then revoked. The kind of disappearance that doesn't need to be announced. Lena and I met once more. Same kind of place. Same controlled environment. No loose ends, she said. No, I agreed. There was nothing personal in it. No connection beyond what had happened. Two people who had intersected at a precise moment for a precise reason. That's it then, I said. Yes, she replied. And that was enough. Months passed. The house changed slowly. Some things I kept. Some I removed. Not out of anger, but clarity. I wasn't restoring what had been there before. I was building something that didn't depend on it. Evan visited more often. We spoke more directly now. Fewer assumptions. Fewer gaps where someone else could insert a version of the truth that suited them. As for me, I went back to work. But not the same work. I turned the camera inward, for the first time in my career. Not at myself, but at something I finally understood better than any war zone I had ever filmed. Betrayal doesn't arrive loudly. It builds quietly, patiently, structurally. And by the time you see it, it's already complete. The difference is what you do next. I used to think survival meant getting out of dangerous places. Now I know better. Sometimes survival means staying still long enough to see everything clearly, and then choosing exactly how it ends.